This is Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. The show is live and is broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube as we speak, really, with our entire show then available on our YouTube channel all of the time. Today, we talk about Pierre Korkie, 1 year after he was kidnapped. The sequestration case of Julius Malema was postponed yesterday. And lastly, we'll take a look, well, an innovative look at Africa. But first, here are our top stories. The ANC has defended President Jacob Zuma's cabinet, saying new departments had to be created and several deputy ministers appointed in departments that are crucial to the delivery of basic services. The ruling parties dismissed criticism that Zuma has appointed a bloated administration as a form of reward for his comrades. Zuma announced an enlarged cabinet of 35 ministers and 37 deputies on Sunday. The new cabinet took the oath of office in a marathon ceremony at the presidential guest house in Pretoria yesterday. Police still do not know the motive of a gunman who shot dead 3 people at a tavern in Port Elizabeth last night. 4 others were also wounded in the incident when the suspect randomly opened fire on patrons. Police say the wounded were taken to hospital. The suspect fled from the scene in a car driven by another man. No one has yet been arrested. The residents believe the shooting is related to gang activities. There have been 5 shooting incidents in the New Brighton area over the past 7 days. And Bafana gave a good account of themselves by playing to an away draw against World Cup bound Australia. The 2 sides scored a goal apiece in the first half of their friendly international in Sydney. Bafana held their own against a determined Australian outfit who were playing their final game on home soil before departing for South America on Wednesday to take part in their 4th World Cup.
Here is an innocent and honest person who served the poor people through his teaching. My 2 children and I miss him terribly. He was just an ordinary man from South Africa. I wish to make it clear that the South African government did not pay any ransom money, and Anas from Gift of the Givers did not receive any money. If he had received money, our South African government would not have tolerated it, and we as a family regard Anas as a trustworthy and honest person. We wish to plead with you, please. Release Pierre like you released me. He is...
Today marks exactly 1 year since South African school teacher Pierre Korkie was kidnapped in the Yemen. The video you just saw was a video released at the beginning of this year by his wife Yolandi in what they then called a final appeal to have him released. It's months later now and still no sign of him making a safe return to South Africa. Korkie and his wife were kidnapped by Al-Qaeda militants in Taiz in the Yemen in May 2013. Yolandi was released and returned to South Africa. At the time of the kidnapping, Korkie was a teacher there, while his wife did relief work in hospitals. Last week, Yolandi released a second video appealing to Al-Qaeda to release her husband. Let's just take a quick look at that.
I wish to also express my gratitude to South Africa, from governmental level, Gift of the Givers, friends and family, the public as well as the media. Thank you for your support, your prayers and compassion. Thank you to God Almighty for sustaining us in this difficult time. I'm reminded of the words of Nelson Mandela, who said, "A task looks impossible until it is done. We will not give up until Pierre is released."
On the 25th of February this year, tribal leaders in that country found out that Korkie was still alive but in bad health. Since then, no more information was available on his condition. Now, to give us the latest, we are joined by Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman from the Gift of the Givers Foundation, who is in our Durban studio. Good morning, Dr. Suleiman. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Evan.
Let's start with the latest, Dr. Suleiman. Do you have any updates for South Africa at the moment?
Yes. The most positive information that we have, that about 2 weeks ago, Pierre Korkie was sighted alive. At the moment, there's an all-out war in Yemen between the Yemeni government and Al-Qaeda forces. And as a result, there's movement of Al-Qaeda through various provinces of Yemen. About just over 2 weeks ago, we were given information that they had spotted the American and Saudi hostages being moved. When we asked them, what about Pierre? They said they didn't see him. About 4 days later, they got back to us, and this is from 3 different sources, including the military, who said they saw Pierre, but he was far away. They saw him, and they saw a Sierra Leone hostage. Now, the guy from Sierra Leone works for the UN. He's a UN aid worker inside Yemen. And 2 of them were sort of moved together from that one province to the other. That's the last information we have, which was a sighting about 2 weeks ago. But they couldn't comment on his state of health. They said, we're not in a position to do that.
And in the negotiations and discussions you're having with those people linked to Al-Qaeda, are you making any progress? Are you having open channels of communication at the moment?
The last was on the 17th of March. Remember, we were doing it initially directly ourselves with Anas Al-Hamati. But on 26th January, when they accused us of taking so-called money that came from South African government to Yemen to be given to us by the minister, that money, of course, never came. There was no such thing. But they believed that money was brought, and Anas stole the ransom money. From that date, we lost all communication. So we had to use intermediaries, and we used Anas's tribal leaders from a place called Mawit. And his tribal leaders then spoke to leaders in Abiyan, because Abiyan is where the biggest concentration of Al-Qaeda is. On the 17th of March, the Abiyan leaders were granted a meeting with Al-Qaeda. It was very short. They waited 2 weeks for that meeting. It took less than 15 minutes. When the Abiyan leaders tried to say, look, release him unconditionally, he's from South Africa, they don't have much money in Africa, they replied, we can't do that because we're holding so many hostages from other countries. If we do it for one, we have to do it for everyone else. Trying to say, under the table, that this is not good for our image. Then they said, look, they didn't give any proof of life, but they said, if you want Pierre, you can have him right now. Just give us the ransom money. But they didn't stipulate, again, if the ransom money was still $3 million, or the figure had changed. The other thing that happened, which was positive, they didn't say, hand Anas over to us. Because in previous discussions, they said, hand Anas over to us, he stole our money. And the other thing they didn't say that if you don't pay the money by a certain date, we will execute Pierre. For the first time since the beginning of the year, there was no timeline to receive the money. There was no threat of execution. And all those points were very positive. But from that date up till today, of course, we haven't had contact with them. We were sending a team in around the end of April to meet them again, but that's when the war broke out, and everything is now at a standstill.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about how proud this group are that kidnapped Pierre. Your sense, would they admit to having made a mistake in that case and let Pierre go unconditionally and maybe surprise everybody?
They won't admit they made a mistake, but if that's to be used as an exit strategy, it may happen. And the only way that can happen is if tribal leaders encourage them to do that. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, something new has been happening in Yemen. We've had many more tribal leaders coming forward. Before, we didn't have that many. But now from different parts of the provinces, they're coming forward and they're saying, we want to help you. One of the reasons that has happened is because we've increased our relief and social activity inside Yemen. So much so that the beneficiaries of our assistance are now walking in the streets with placards saying, Al-Qaeda, please release Pierre Korkie on humanitarian grounds. South Africa is not our enemy. South Africa is helping us. See how we're benefiting. Please release him unconditionally. That kind of message. And the tribal leaders are saying it, and they're getting braver and more outspoken. And they came to us, as I said, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, saying, in Yemen, it's the tribal way. And we tribal leaders are connected to each other. And some of the tribal leaders are connected to Al-Qaeda. Maybe we can make a difference. And that's what we're hoping on for now, for the tribal leaders to, to put in a plan of action, to negotiate. And maybe the exit plan is we shouldn't have taken a South African, take him unconditionally. South African people are helping us a lot in Yemen, so please let him go.
A lot seems to be happening to make a difference in the Yemen, but are we in South Africa then doing enough to make a difference in this case? It seems as if this case has almost gone cold in the media a little bit.
That's not the media's fault. We deliberately cut it off from the media because we didn't want information at that stage to go through. There were a lot of sensitive things happening behind the scenes, and that would have affected what was going on in Yemen. So at that point, we decided not to release too much information because really we were battling. We made it clear that we were not making progress. After 17th of March, what could we offer them? We didn't have $3 million. They said, if you have $3 million, you can have him right now. And there's no way in the world, then, now, tomorrow, in the next 15 years, we're going to have $3 million. So we're trying to put together a different package to say, look, exactly what the people are saying in Yemen, that South Africans are helping you. We don't have that kind of money, but we're helping your own people. Look at it in those lines and release Yolandi along those lines. And before we could go back with more tribal leaders to give that kind of message, this war broke out.
Finally, Dr. Suleiman, in your exchanges with the family here in South Africa, how are they shoring up and how are they being supported?
They're doing brilliantly, I must say. Yolandi is a very strong woman. I was with her about 10 days ago. We're in communication virtually every week, and almost every other day. And I have to feed back to them to say what's happening. Because as you said in the media, you don't know sometimes, the story has gone cold. Now, I can't have that kind of a situation with her. There'll be no hope. I have to keep telling her, we did this, we did that, this worked, that didn't work, this failed, this looks promising. So in every way, she keeps telling me, if you're doing something tomorrow, let me know. We will pray on it. We will fast for a good outcome. And in every way, her prayer, her spirituality, her family support, friends from Bloemfontein and other parts of South Africa have been very supportive of her. She's a very respectable, dignified person, a church-going type of person, very strong in faith, and it's a faith that's giving her strength. She keeps saying, the Almighty will deliver for me, and I believe that. It's a matter of patience. She's being tested, but I'm sure sooner rather than later, we will have Pierre out from there unconditionally and in a state of health, still fit for him to travel to South Africa.
Well, we hope that you're right, Dr. Suleiman. Thank you for joining us this morning, and you guys are doing fantastic work. Now, in Bloemfontein, Korkie's hometown, locals and well-wishers have been doing every little bit they can to help for the last year or so, from raising money for the kidnappers to arranging prayer groups. Pierre's wife, Yolandi, their 2 children and other relatives and friends have for the last 365 days been counting on prayers alone to save him. Let's cross now to our reporter, Richard Newton, who is in Bloemfontein to tell us more how the story has affected the community there. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Evan.
This truly is a story that's deeply affected that community, but before we get to that point, just tell us about your interactions with the Korkie family until now.
Well, yes, Evan, we actually spoke to the family spokesman yesterday, and the latest information that we were given is that Yolandi and the family have asked South Africans, those South Africans out there all over the country, as well as here in Bloemfontein, where, as you said, the support is very strong. But she's appealed for people to pray for Pierre's urgent release, wisdom for all the parties involved in negotiations, urgency in the hearts of the kidnappers to find a quick resolution for Pierre's release, and endurance on a physical, emotional and spiritual level for Pierre himself under what has got to be absolutely terrifying and very, very difficult circumstances. So the family, as Dr. Suleiman was saying, up to speed on what's going on, always working with the community, working with church groups, working with whoever is assisting them to say, look, guys, let's pray, let's collect, let's do this. We need to get Pierre back. And I think one of the most important things that we've gathered from recent times is this information that Pierre has been seen alive. The hope that brings, the tribal leaders that are getting more involved, the changes, some of them subtle, but the changes happening in Yemen. And I think that all brings this hope that, yes, it's been a year, and it's been a really tough year, but there is always that hope. And the family are clinging to this, and they're getting a lot of support from the Bloemfontein community. You'll remember Pierre was a teacher here, the school, he was at Grey College. The old boys have made contributions to the ransom fund. The teachers, former colleagues involved, praying, giving support where they can. So generally, based in Bloemfontein, yes, a lot of support, but it goes much wider than that. And I think South Africans out there are all rooting for Pierre and realize that it's been a really tough year.
Now, Richard, on a sort of human level with the family that's staying behind in Bloemfontein, of course one can pray and so forth, but for the rest of it, you have to get on with your normal day-to-day life. I suppose kids go to school and so forth. And is this the case there?
Well, it is, but you must understand that getting on with your life, you can't really go forward. You can't really focus on much more else than Pierre's safety and whether he will be returned to the family. And I think this is where the community, whether it be the wider community or very close friends, come into its own, because you need that support and you need a shoulder to lean on. You can't be tough all of the time. You know, it really is difficult. And I think that they've been shielded from the media for the most part. Obviously, all the media want to speak to the family, want to find out how the kids are doing, want to find out how Yolande is doing. But generally, they are being shielded, and I think there's a good reason for that. We also heard from Dr. Suleiman about the media, the quiet time, if you like, and there is a lot of that as well, that a lot of the stuff is being kept behind the scenes, if you like. Because a lot of it is it's crucial stuff happening. It's knife edge negotiation going on, and they don't want to splash too much information out to the media. But of course, the media are also a very important partner in keeping people aware of what's going on and to provide information on what the situation is at any given time.
But this really has then taken a terrible toll on the family, and how are they being supported? In this quest, one suppose. What time do you tell them to move on? How do they deal with these kinds of things?
Well, I think it's a day-by-day thing, Eben. I think they have a lot of support from, as I say, friends and family. They have people they can contact day or night, any time, for that support. We've seen the church groups that they've been involved with also lending assistance. I'm told that the ransom fund is ongoing and people are still contributing to that, although for obvious reasons we're not getting any information on the contents of that fund at the moment. And I think it is a day-to-day thing, and I think when we have information coming through, like the fact that Pierre was seen, not sure of his health, we know his health hasn't been good, but he has been seen with other hostages, it gives you that hope for the next day. And as long as you've got something to get you through the next day and the next day, you've got to keep going until there is a resolution. And I suppose it comes down to how much you believe there will be a resolution. I mean, we heard Yolande saying that, in the words of Nelson Mandela, everything is impossible until it becomes possible. And I mean, we can't put ourselves in that position. You can't imagine what it must be like to go through that. And I think, as Dr. Suleiman was saying as well, the family very strong. Question is, for how much longer? How long will this go on for?
Thank you very much, Richard Newton, our specialist correspondent in Bloemfontein, giving us an insight into the mental turmoil that the Korkie family's been going through, and also how it's affected the wider community there in the Free State. Here at Newsroom, we would like to show our support to the Korkie family as well as gift to the givers by highlighting this unfortunate situation on all our social media and digital platforms. There you see the hashtag that we've developed. It's called Korkie 1 year. That is today. So to show your support, that's the hashtag we use. Send us your messages. We'll post it on our timeline. Then you leave your messages on our Facebook page, and we'll interact on that front. But let's now take a quick look at what's making international headlines. Pope Francis made history for a second day running when he became the first pope to place a wreath on the grave of Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism. The day before, he made waves by referring to the Palestinian territories as the State of Palestine, a papal first, and praying at a West Bank barrier that Palestinians see as a symbol of Israeli oppression. Then the Miami Herald, reporting on the latest rumors that the abducted Nigerian schoolgirls have been located. More on that story on our Facebook page as well. Then All Politics in the UK papers has leaked opinion polls suggest that the Liberal Democrats' chances at the 2015 general election would be improved if Nick Clegg was no longer party leader. These front pages are all available on our Facebook page. Of course, Twitter, we're also there. Let's have a look at what you are talking about at SABC Newsroom. That's where you interact with us on Twitter. sabcnews.co.za or at SABC Newsroom on Twitter. There you have Karin Jordan. How does one remain strong? Most dreadful story. Yes, the Korkie story is indeed that. And that is the key question. It's very difficult. Memory Molapo says, bring back Korkie just for you, Casper, she says. And there you have a picture of Yolande making her appeal. Please pray for Korkie family. That one from Scott Congdon. And of course, that's the page that we got up. Korkie, 1 year. Show your support there. We want this father of two to be released as soon as possible. Time now for us to take a short break. Of course, after this, we'll look at the life and times of Julius Malema. Don't go away. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Africa is symbolized by these magnificent trees. The Sunland Big Baobab is carbon dated to be around 1,600 years old. When baobabs become 1,000 years old, they begin to hollow inside. In the Big Baobab, this has resulted in the world-famous Baobab Tree Bar.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom on SABC News. The North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria yesterday ruled that economic freedom fighters leader Julius Malema's sequestration be extended until August the 25th. In 2012, the court put Malema under provisional sequestration regarding outstanding personal income tax of 16.2 million rand after failing to submit tax returns between 2006 and 2010. The court appointed Sechaba Trust as curator to oversee the administration of Malema's property. That resulted in the attachment of some of his assets that were sold at public auctions. For now, it seems he's off the hook. But what are the implications of such a move? From Cape Town, we are joined by constitutional law expert Professor Pierre Korkie from the University of Cape Town. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Professor, what do you make of the North Gauteng High Court ruling yesterday?
Well, obviously it is good news for Mr. Malema, because if they had confirmed the sequestration and he'd become insolvent, then he would automatically have lost his seat in the National Assembly. But what has happened here is what often happens with SARS, is they try and make a deal with you, and they say, if you're going to come clean with us, if you declare all your assets, if you declare all your income, if you come clean about your taxes that you owe, and then we make a deal about how to repay the amount that we say you owe us, then they won't proceed with the matter. Because what this is really about is they said, you cannot pay us back what you owe us, and therefore we're going to apply for your sequestration. And that, if that was successful, of course, it would have meant the end of Mr. Malema's membership of the National Assembly.
I want to go to that specific area. I think it's Section 46 and Section 47 of the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. If you can just take us through that and tell us how that really works in practice and how it's implemented.
Yes, well, the Constitution says that any South African citizen can be elected to the National Assembly, but there are certain requirements or certain disqualifications, if you will. And it says that you cannot become a member of the National Assembly, or you will lose your membership of the National Assembly. For example, if you are convicted of a crime and sentenced to more than 1 year in imprisonment without the option of a fine, if you become insolvent, if you are not of sound mind, in other words, if you go mad, and so forth. The argument being that certain types of people, because of the nature of their legal standing and their capabilities, cannot actually perform the duties of a member of the National Assembly properly, and you would lose your seat if you become one of those people. There's another provision that is linked to the floor crossing. You cannot just leave the party that elected you to the seat. So these provisions are all there to ensure that, in a way, voters get value for their money.
I wanted to ask you about how do you see Julius Malema's case proceed now? What the implications and what are the options on the table for him?
Yes, there's going to be a return date in August, at which time there will be more clarity about the deal about paying back the money. I think that is the big issue now. If it is true that Mr. Malema has now come clean, that he has actually really declared all the assets, and he has really been honest about what he was owing to SARS, then that is out of the way, and that would be a precondition, of course, for this agreement to stick. Then the second step would be they must agree on how to pay back reportedly the 16 or now 18 million with interest, that amount of money. And that must come from some way. So either from Mr. Malema, I don't know if he has that kind of money, or from the trust or supporters or whatever. And usually SARS doesn't insist that you pay it back in one go, but there has to be an agreement about paying it back within a reasonable time. And that will now be the next hurdle, I think, for Mr. Malema to ensure that he stays in the National Assembly.
We've seen in the last 24 hours really a softening of his stance, that of Julius Malema a little bit. He's got a more conciliatory tone towards SARS, and they've also opened the door. So the next couple of months, you expect the parties to come together and really come to terms?
You know, it's very difficult to say because I don't know the finances of this and how much money is available. But if any of the other cases of SARS is anything to go by, and the way they usually deal with it, if there is money to repay, and if SARS believes that it is possible over time to repay the now almost 18 million that they say Mr. Malema owes them, in installments, then if they really believe that, then I think there's every reason to believe that this agreement will stick. Of course, there's also the fact that Mr. Malema is actually elected to Parliament by quite a few members of the electorate, more than a million votes. People voted for the EFF. So it would be a bit awkward for the democracy to disqualify somebody that seems to be popular among some sections of the population, at least, on the basis that he has not paid his taxes. So there's every reason, I'm not sure if SARS take this into account, but from a political perspective, there's every reason for the democracy and for the sake of the democracy to ensure that he remains in Parliament.
You're confident then of a political solution to this problem, you say?
Well, it's not a political solution because in the sense that the politics makes no difference if there is no full disclosure, firstly, and if there is not a belief on the side of SARS that they are actually going to get the money back, and that there is a doable, practical, executable plan on the part of Mr. Malema and his supporters to pay back the money within a reasonable time. If they believe that is the case, then the tax problem is going to go away, as it does for many other people. Some other people who are not politicians also get into terrible trouble with SARS, and they usually if they admit their mistake and if they agree to come up to date with their taxes and so forth over time, then they are not prosecuted and they are also not sequestrated.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us this morning. That's constitutional expert Professor Pierre Korkie from the University of Cape Town joining us live there in our Sea Point studio. Now, top story, of course, members of President Jacob Zuma's new cabinet have taken the oath of office in what was a marathon ceremony at the presidential guest house in Pretoria yesterday. Proceedings began just after 3 p.m. and were concluded by 6 o'clock last night. No fewer than 4 judges were roped in to officiate as around 70 ministers and deputy ministers took the oath.
It's the 5th democratic government since the dawn of democracy. After announcing his team on Sunday, they took the oath of office yesterday at the Sefako Makgato guest house in Pretoria. First to be called was the newly appointed second in command.
Cyril Ramaphosa, as the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. And I now request the Chief Justice to swear him into office.
After taking his oath, ministers also took theirs. President Zuma retained many ministers from his previous administration, but he also brought several new faces to the country's new executive. One by one, they took their oath of office. In South Africa's diverse languages, took center stage. The Zuma administration is expected to hit the ground running as the president has promised this will be a term of delivery. SABC News, Pretoria.
One of the African stories that have gone global and that continues to be in the international limelight is the abduction of more than 200, almost 270 young girls in Nigeria by Boko Haram, an Al-Qaeda-linked group in that country. Let's take a look at some of your comments that have been coming in as we try and keep this campaign alive, keep them in our minds. Kate Henshaw says, every child has a right to be loved, educated and protected. Every child has a right to reach their full potential. Bring back our girls, no doubt. Rosalind Isaac says, so the Nigerian government knows where the schoolgirls are, but points out force won't be used to rescue them. I smell a rat. Well, I think some of the girls' lives might be in danger if they would be. I think a multinational force will soon come in there and hopefully make the difference. Let's unite, says Nikki. Pray and act to fight these human rights abuses. Stop the trafficking, I say, and bring back our girls. Save Miriam. Jeff says, it's been like 6 weeks. What a disgrace. Bring back our girls, he says. Bright Eugene the 7th says, knowing where the abducted Chibok girls are being held should be a plus. He is hoping the army now go all out to bring back our girls. I understand that the US government also have sent in about 80 troops to try and track them down, and hopefully we'll get some good news sooner rather than later. Let's go to our Facebook page, of course, where you get all these stories updated all the time. Government communication spokesperson Pumla Williams has urged people who follow developments in government via social media to do so through authentic accounts linked to these departments' websites. This after they became aware of a number of fake accounts emerging following President Jacob Zuma's announcement of the new national executive. Then, Limpopo's Traditional Affairs Department has approved 275 and rejected 36 applications for permits for initiation schools. More on this story, as well as our interview that we had a little bit earlier with Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman about Pierre Korkie, will be available on our Facebook page. Today, it's 1 year that Pierre Korkie has been in custody, really. Now, a new heartwarming video that highlights all the splendor South Africa has to offer. It's gone viral globally, and it's released by South African Tourism, saying that when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know. The full clip is available on our Facebook page, but let's just take a quick sneak peek.
Suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. In this place, beauty has a much deeper meaning. Which is why, when you meet South Africa, you will reconsider what you think you know.
We are South Africa. This is Africa. We are Earth. We love you. This is Newsroom. We'll be back after a short break.
Sasol says it's still ready and waiting for government to give the green light to fracking. Sasol avoided Eskom's woes because it makes more than 70% of its own energy. The ECB left interest rates unchanged at a record low of 0.25%. The ECB also failed to suspend weekly operations to soak up money it spent on sovereign bonds at the height of the Eurozone debt crisis, known as sterilisation.
That's business news, weekdays at 8 p.m. on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Ethiopia. The Prime Minister is Mr. Haile Mariam Desalegn. Ethiopia is Africa's oldest independent country. It was never colonized. The population is more than 80 million people. One of the major languages spoken is English. Monetary unit, birr.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a quick look at our top stories. The ANC has defended President Jacob Zuma's new cabinet, saying new departments had to be created and several deputy ministers appointed in departments that are crucial to the delivery of basic services. The ruling parties dismissed criticism that Zuma has appointed a bloated administration as a form of reward for his comrades. Police still do not know the motive of a gunman who shot dead 3 people at a tavern in Port Elizabeth last night. 4 others were also wounded in the incident when the suspect randomly opened fire on patrons. Police say the wounded were taken to hospital. The residents believe the shooting is related to gang activities in the area. And Bafana gave a good account of themselves by playing to an away draw against World Cup-bound Australia. The two sides scored a goal apiece in the first half of the friendly international in Sydney. Bafana held their own against a determined Australian outfit. Now, Newsroom is the digital platform that focuses on amplifying innovation and good news from across the African continent. Along with the new innovations, the platform highlights selfless actions by individuals, companies and governments on our beautiful continent. Every month from now on, the team behind New Innovation will join us here on Newsroom to discuss the top stories that stood out at New Innovation this month. We are joined by Katu Mashao, the founder of New Innovation and co-founder Mwako Ramohalale. Very good morning to the both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's a mouthful that I said there, actually. But just before we go into these good stories, just tell us a little bit about New Innovation again, how you guys are thinking and how you're going to change the world.
Thanks, Erwin. 3 words: inform, educate, and inspire. That's what we seek out to do. If you are informed, you get to be educated and inspired to do better. When you do not know what the rest of Africa is doing, you would not know exactly what needs to be done going forward. Yeah. Innovation is based on imagination, and you would realize that if you have not seen what other people are doing, you might actually not imagine whatever your imagination could be lower than what has been done. So Innovation seeks to go out there and take out all the stories, all those good stories, the success stories. If you look at it now, the story of Pierre Korkie, the Bring Back Our Girls, it's all negative stuff. Yeah. But beyond that, there's a lot of good things that are happening. That's what we seek to capture. And that's why we're sitting here saying, let us begin to take this movement forward. Not only do we want to get it done through new innovation, but let everybody start talking of their own stories from their own backyard.
Yeah, because we have so many beautiful stories to tell, and they don't always come out. But tell us about the African Innovation Foundation, who've announced the winners of this big innovation prize for Africa.
It's a very great initiative. The purpose of the awards is for innovators to not only come up with great ideas, but ideas that are solutions to problems in Africa. Yeah. So when you look at the winners, these guys created a medical device. It's an injectable porcine that you just put. It helps the bones recover quicker. So people can avoid going for bone transplants. They can just quickly inject that thing into their system and the bones will be fine within, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And then we've got some good news about a South African who started up a social photography app, Over, and he's won an award as well.
Yes, Aaron Marshall is the Cape Town bunch from the Republic of Cape Town. Well, they've been termed as the best startup in the world currently by a conference that was held in Milan earlier this year.
That's massive.
They came out from over 1,000 applications that came out from all over the world, and a South African app made it. So you could realize that there's a lot of stuff that we need to capture as South Africans and as Africans. I mean, if you look at that particular Over, as it's been filmed now, you'd realize the type of stuff that it does, it's not been done by Instagram. Yeah. It's not been done by any other app out there. I mean, we've recently seen another one where a local, an African company, OG, beat Apple to it. To come out with black emoticons. You know those yellow head keys? Yeah. Now, those ones that these guys, Amish Patel, they've come up with black ones. The ones that like you and me, and those that relate. It's the type of good stuff, you know. I mean, there's certain gestures that are more African than not when you do them, and when sometimes you want to just scream and put your head up, but you can't be able to because those yellow keys are just European based.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. Yes. This roundtable discussion was attended by public school students from Joburg North. Just tell us about this.
That's a famous quote by Albert Einstein. Yes. So the issue we're facing now, especially in the academic world, is that people are being taught the history of Hitler and of Shaka Zulu. And, I mean, it's all well and great that we're learning the history of our countries, but we need to now encourage the kids to be beyond creative, to be imaginative about where the future is going and be relevant to the 21st century's needs. Yeah.
Absolutely, but you know, to get their electricity and basic services, unfortunately, would have to be adequate.
Yes.
African countries can now bank on solar, on the solar plans, and that's great to see.
This is good news. It's called the SIPS. There's Samsung that has come up with this initiative where a mere container would just be powered by solar, and they put in and fed in computers in there. And now they're bringing in Wi-Fi to be able to say rural schools that are out there across Africa, whether it's Makado in Limpopo or Bujumbura, they now can be able to get internet across the board. So there's a lot of good things like what you're seeing. That has been done in Rwanda, recently was done in Kenya. So you can see in the spirit of Africa Day celebration, there's a lot of...
It's happening. Africa Day is just behind us. Yeah. We live on a great continent. Guys, thank you for bringing the good news, and next month we'll be back and we'll do a little bit more, and we'll extend it as we go along, hopefully, because we've got a good story to tell on this continent.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. New Innovation joining us here this morning on Newsroom, telling us the good news about the continent and also how we need to innovate on this continent if we're going to head. We end on a bit of a down note today. 3 people have been shot dead and 4 others wounded in the shooting incident at a tavern in Port Elizabeth last night. Police say a gunman entered a tavern in New Brighton and randomly opened fire on some of the patrons there.
Wounded victims were taken to hospital, all in a serious condition. The motive for the attack is not known, but people living in the area fear it is related to gang activities.
Police are investigating a case of 2 counts of murder and 4 attempted murder following a shooting that happened at Chipa's Tavern here in Neighbour Street, where one suspect allegedly came into the tavern and started to shoot randomly. The motive for the shooting is unknown and the suspect is unknown, but the police are following up the leads.
During the past week, 5 shooting incidents have taken place in the New Brighton area. The suspect is still at large. It is said he fled in a waiting car driven by another man.
Well, it's tense then. For the latest, we cross to SABC reporter in Port Elizabeth, Yuri Blichner, to give us the latest and some other news they're following in the region there. Good morning to you, Yuri. A very disturbing story. What's the latest developments then there?
Well, today the police will continue their investigation into the story and look at the possible links that it might not have just been a random attack and that it can be linked to some other violent acts which have taken place in the New Brighton area over the last week. There's been several shooting incidents. Earlier in the week, the police were chasing hijacking suspects and fire ensued between the suspects and the police, and apparently even more than 50 shots were fired. Then, following that incident, the police raided one of the taverns in New Brighton where they arrested 2 men and confiscated several weapons, including an assault rifle. And the possibilities now, if all this links up, will be investigated, and if last night's shooting can be linked to that and it might have been a hit. Nobody really knows, but the severity of the attack really shocked the community. As you've said, 3 people dead, 4 people in hospital in a critical condition. And until late last night, the police forensic teams were on the scene. They'll obviously return today in daylight to really make a proper assessment of the crime scene and take it forward from there. In the meantime, the community lives in a little bit of fear as these random attacks is something which you cannot plan for, and it's something which you do not want to happen to you or your family.
Yuri, the community spoke in the piece about gang violence and the threat of gang violence. Is this a problem there? And what would relate to the gang violence? Is it a drug business? What's happening?
Well, here in the Port Elizabeth area, gang violence and gang-related crimes are more related to the northern areas of the city where the established gangs are, where there's a gang culture. This seems to be something that is not known in the more traditional township areas like New Brighton. And as the police also say, they have very little information of where these kind of things come from. From our side, these are the first kind of things which we've seen evolving in the township areas. So if it is specifically gang-related or part of a drug war, there's very little information on that, really.
Yuri, I'm sure you'll keep us updated as how the story develops. One hopes it doesn't escalate. But I wanted to talk about Mandla Mandela, who is also in the news again. Just tell us a little bit about the young Mr. Mandela.
Yes, the grandson of the former president of the country, Nelson Mandela, he's in court. His assault and pointing of a firearm trial started yesterday. Now, this trial emanates from an incident in October last year in Mthatha where Mr. Mandela allegedly assaulted and pointed a firearm at the victim, Mlamli Ngudle. Mr. Ngudle allegedly bumped into the vehicles of some of the guests Mr. Mandela was entertaining at a restaurant in Mthatha, and then the fracas ensued. And in this, Mr. Ngudle alleges he was pulled from the vehicle, the gun was pointed at him, and this trial started yesterday. And in the first evidence led, Mr. Ngudle told his version of the stories that he actually didn't bump the cars, and how an aggressive Mandla Mandela approached him, dragged him out of his car, put the gun against his head. He also spoke of them trading insults. And then he spoke about his medical condition, saying that he had to go to the doctor several times, that he even had to undergo an operation to repair some of the damage he sustained following the attack. Then during cross-examination, he was questioned about his medical condition, and in the end also his medical report was provisionally accepted by the court. As the trial continues today, cross-examination will continue, and several more witnesses will probably be called to testify in this case, and most likely Mr. Mandela too, to testify in his own defense. Yesterday, several members of the Mandela family and villagers from Mvezo were at the court supporting Zwelivelile Mandela while the trial started.
Yuri, and then finally, just a quick update on the situation at Solomon Mahlangu High School there in your area.
Well, at this stage, it seems like we can report there's some good news that the desks actually did start arriving yesterday, and the last of the desks actually arrived late last night, and it's expected that today these desks will now be put into the school, and the more than 1,000 learners from Solomon Mahlangu can actually move into their new school, which was refurbished over a 2-year period. Just some background on this. Last week, the parents and the SGB of the school decided to take the children out of the temporary structures in which they were receiving schooling, as these structures were dilapidated and literally falling apart, as you can see on the pictures behind me. They deemed it a very dangerous situation for their children, and they flatly refused to send them back. And then for 3 days there were no schooling, and that put the pressure on the department to expedite the process of getting the new desks through to the new refurbished school. And it's quite important that that the kids get back to school, as from tomorrow mid-year matric exams start, and I think the first paper up is the English paper. So there's some good news there, and we'll report back later today to see on what the current situation is, and did the kids manage to move into their new premises and sort of put that old dilapidated building behind them and look forward to completing a successful school year.
Yuri, thank you very much for joining us today. That's Yuri Blichnout coming to us live from Port Elizabeth, giving us an update on, well, the top stories in that region, and also an update after that shooting there last night in New Brighton that claimed 3 lives. Stay on this platform for the rest of the day if you want more updates on that story as it develops. Newsroom has been broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park here in Johannesburg in South Africa. We are live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. with highlights rebroadcast then at 2 in the afternoon and a repeat at 5 a.m. the following morning. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.